This is Near-DeathTV. I'm your host, Laura Ketchledge. I'm also an author. In 1979, I became a near-death experiencer. I chose to explain the truth I learned about the afterlife, reincarnation, and near-death experience through my fictional book series, The Near-Death Saga. While dead, I was shown all human beings are shrouded in ignorance by design, in order to learn valuable lessons in each incarnation. When you die, the artificial facade falls away, and we awaken from the dream into reality. For more information, you can find us at neardeathtv.com. Please join us as we explore the after effects of near-death experience. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Near-Death TV. I'm your host, Laura Ketchledge, and today we have a very interesting guest on. His name is Mike Marable, and he's the author of Why Am I Here? A Handbook for the Human Experience. Welcome to the show, Mike, and how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Laura. Thank you for having me on.
Good, good. Mike, this is a big book, and has a lot of insights. Can you share what was your inspiration to write this book, and basically, Why Am I Here?
Yeah, isn't that sort of the question we're all asking? The existential question of life itself is, why are we here? You know, I think for your listeners, I'm not sure your demographics, but, you know, there comes a point in your life when you just kind of think about, you know, what's my purpose? Why am I here? Is this all there is? And when you start to ask those questions, it's almost like you're abdicating to some degree your free will. So doors start to open up when people will ask those questions. You know, what's it all about, Alfie? If you go back far enough, you know what I'm talking about when I say that. But so really, that was the impetus for the book, was that, you know, we come here to the planet and we kind of go through our routines in this sort of consensus reality. But, you know, what is it all about, really? So I explored that for myself, and I shared my observations with others, you know, about my life experience and how I came to certain conclusions. So, I mean, that everybody's got an opinion, right? But I based it on some things that we'll probably talk about during this interview.
Well, I think that it is a must-read book, and we all can find it on Amazon through the joy of Kindle. You know.
Thanks for the plug.
Mike, how old were you when you had your first out-of-body experience?
I was 37. It was actually the summer of 1987.
Can you tell us, you know, when you went out of body, were you trying to do this? Was this a spontaneous event? And, you know, you must have been shocked. So you just kind of sum up what happened?
Well, no, I wasn't shocked. Back during college, I had read Robert Monroe's book. So I went to Virginia Tech, and we had a great bookstore there on campus, right off campus. It wasn't part of the school. And I was perusing the books, and I saw this thing called Journeys Out of the Body, and you know, I opened it up and I ended up buying the book, and I thought it was fascinating, but I put it down. I didn't think much about it, you know, until that happened to me in 1987. But it was sort of, you know, having out-of-body experiences is something, you know, we do all the time. It's just whether we remember them or not. That's everybody detaches from their body to a certain degree as they sleep, but do people remember it? Are they lucid about the process itself? And that's what happened to me, is that I became lucid during my out of body, And then I tried to figure out what I could do. And I remember what Robert Monroe did. So I at least had some kind of guidelines about, what you could actually do with this altered state of consciousness.
Well, I think that's fascinating. Do you draw a parallel between near-death experience and out-of-body experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the near-death experience, obviously, you're transported into whatever realm it is that the people that do out-of-body experiences experience to some degree. Now, I don't know how far we'll get into this, but when you think about other reality systems, really what you're talking about is vibrational frequency. So, like, I'll use your radio as an analogy. So when you turn your radio on, you might be on 710. If you turn it up, dial up, then you're on a whole nother station, and you can't hear that station that you were listening to before. And so that's what happens in out-of-body state or near-death experiences. Any of these, you're basically shifting your frequency. So we live in a very dense frequency here in our Earth reality, but in dreams or out-of-body experiences or any other altered states, what you're able to do is somehow overcome this limitation that you have of your mind and be able to shift frequencies. And that's basically what an out-of-body experience is, and a near-death experience. So they share that similarity.
Yes, and then you venture into the non-physical world, which is exciting and a little frightening. Mike, in your book, Why Am I Here? Can you tell us how you explain to the reader how things work in non-physical reality?
Well, let me start with a disclaimer here. First of all, I don't know anything for sure. And anybody that writes a book or does a lecture, I mean, the best they can do is give their impression. So it's sort of like, have you ever traveled? Have you ever been to Italy or France or Paris?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So you read about it before you went there, right?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Did what you read have, was that helpful for you when you actually got there? I mean, when you arrived in the location, did it match your expectations of what you read?
Kind of, sort of, but not really. Being
right,
there,
right, yeah.
It's so more intense. And I'm asking your impression. I'm not asking you, to recite the gospel, but, Mike, you've done so much more than so much of us. So your impressions are very valuable to us.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So, and also we're limited by language. So, trying to describe some of these things using the limitations of our actual language, because we almost have to think about the words that we're going to combine to be able to describe something that's really undescribable. So we do the best we can. A lot of times it's more about the feeling and the impressions that you get. But I just want to put the disclaimer that for the purpose of being someone that goes into other worlds, I really don't want to have a lot of expectations about it, because, here on Earth, we think that our impressions, our beliefs, our ideas about things tend to form our reality. That is much more so when you go into non-physical realms. So allowing your expectations and beliefs to take over can change the reality there. So I try to keep an open mind. But I use the analogy of going to, I'll just use mine for Tuscany. So we went to Tuscany, and I'd read all about it. I got the guidebooks and all of that. And when I got there, I had no idea. I mean, I couldn't even in my imagination come up with the beauty and the magnificence and the taste of the foods and all the experiences that I had. And even though I was there for 2 weeks, I really only got to sample a really small part of it. Mm-hmm. So I came back and I don't have a fully formed impression of Tuscany, and I certainly don't have a fully formed impression of other dimensions.
Yes, but you've been there and you remember. So that is the key.
Yeah, I do. I thought you might ask me this question, so I was thinking, how many excursions? So I was trying to think, how many have I had conservatively? Mm-hmm. So I figured out over 30 years, I probably have had 50 a year. So, you know, that's quite a few excursions. But lately, over the past 3 years, I've been doing a lot more of it because I'm writing another book on this very subject. So I've been, you know, actively trying to do this. And if you set an intention and you have a will, and it's kind of amazing that you get non-physical helpers that are really interested in helping you with your book. So I've been doing a lot more of it.
Well, I think we all have our own cheerleading team on the other side. That's just me. So, Mike, you know, people would like to know what your impression is, and with the type of they kind of want to know the nitty gritty. And the devil is in the details, my friend. So, do you think that there are, you know, as you leave your physical reality, you go into other dimensions, and each dimension progresses to less and less dense? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to describe it. Like I said, it's all about frequency. So there are unlimited number of realms there. So it's, you know, it's really hard to, the ones that I go into, that could just be a very small sample of the millions of different realities that are there.
And, you know, we call them consensus realities. I'm stealing that from William Buhlman, that term, because I think that guy is spot on. But, you know, each reality, were you surprised that they were more thought responsive than physical reality?
You know, some of them are denser and they're more parallel to our Earth reality here. You know, I think Rudolf Steiner talked about what we call the borderlands, which kind of overlap some of the frequencies of reality. And when people go across and they don't quite make a smooth transition, they can get kind of bogged down in that lower vibrational frequencies and stay there because, you know, time is, the era of time for us is always, you know, we kind of have a sense of time here, but time there is totally different. You don't have a sense of time. So you don't know how long you're staying in those places. And, you know, as I told you, you know, I do kind of psychopomp work, or I guess what you would call shaman work, in that I go and do rescues from the more denser places in that consensus realities, mm-hmm. to try to get them to way stations. And human beings, like myself, and I'm not the only one, there are quite a few of us that do this. I found out after I went to the Monroe Institute, to their Lifeline program, and we help people across and get out of that consensus reality that is denser and move on to some of the higher realities. But, you know, here's one of the misconceptions I think that some people have about, you know, what the deathing experience is you don't cross over and suddenly you're an enlightened being. I mean, whatever stuff you got going on, you've got right after you die. So I don't know if that bothers any people to hear that or not, but whatever you have here, you got there.
Well, I think this book, Why Am I Here, is going to be a must-read for many of the listeners. What do you try to explain in this book?
Well, when I had my opening experience back in 1987, if I could backtrack just for a second, kind of give you the origin story of this. So in 1987, I was I was like 30 some years old, maybe 37 years old. I was having a great time. I was driving a BMW, had a great job. Everything was going great. Life was good. And I had a awakening experience, just total one with the universe. I don't know why I had it. There wasn't anything going on that would have promoted it or prompted it. So, and in that period, I had like minutes where my personality went away and I had the understanding of my, I guess you call true self. And then it closed back up. And then over the next 12 years, I had what I found out later to be called a Kundalini Opening. So that was quite the ordeal. If any of your listeners know anything about that, it's funny. People say they want to have that type of experience. I go, well, if you do, you need a whole lot of spare time on your hands and lots of resources to be able, because your life is turned upside down. Not unlike somebody that's had a near-death experience. In fact, people who had near-death experiences, I gravitated toward because, they could sort of understand because of the paradigm shift that their lives went through as a result of their experience. Mine was not unlike that. Once you kind of see behind the facade of reality, it's hard to go back home again.
Oh, exactly. I had my near death in 1979, and all the listeners know that. And I felt there's such an isolation and so separate from other people. That's why I'm doing this show, Mike, is that I think, you want to hear common sense people that have gone through an experience. You don't want to hear wackadoos, try to drum in their philosophy in your brain on the, when you listen to the podcast. You want to hear open-minded, fair-minded people, and that's kind of what I strive for in the show. So, Mike,
right? Yeah.
Why? Because I want other people who've gone through what I've gone through, NDE or out-of-body experience, to have a place to listen, to learn, and not to be isolated. That's my
right, exactly. And the question you had asked, I wanted to give a little bit of the origin story of that, was that what I learned through my opening and then the subsequent years of, out-of-body experiences, I put in that book. And, I think that there's some important points in the book. The next book I'm writing, if people want to know more about experiences that I've had and what's going on in the other realms, not unlike Manuel Swedenborg, or if they've read the Seth materials or Robert Monroe's book or Rudolf Steiner's, all of us bring back information from what we find there, because when you think about it, I guess the most important day of your life is when you're born, but a close second might be the day that you go back over.
Yes. Now, I think, as you after 50, sort of last chapter of our lives, I think, Mike, do you agree with me that people should prepare for the transition after death? I mean, if we were taking a trip to Alaska, we'd be packing winter clothes and getting a map. But so many people don't prepare for the next transition, after death. Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I'm all about in this stage of my life, is helping people sort of understand that. So I'm glad you brought that up. Yes. As you said, we if we're going to take a trip, some people who are particularly fastidious might, prepare for every trip before they go to the supermarket. They make their list. They know what aisles they're going to be going to. They go to the supermarket, they know, but they don't give anywhere near that amount of thought to what happens, when they make their transition back to go back home. So, one of the main things that you want to do is make amends, don't leave any loose ends if you can help it on this side. If you have grievances, you might want to resolve them. You don't want any regrets. You're going to take those with you. And it's good to get as much of that done as you can. And just more on the practical sense, just make sure all your financial loose ends are tied up so you don't worry about them when you cross over. Because sometimes people do. And there are reasons why people hang around and they don't make a smooth transition. And these are among them. And the other one is, of course, they don't realize that they've died, So if some of your listeners are familiar with what the Tibetans call bardo, and again, I'm limited by language, so you say something like Kundalini or bardo or all that. I don't really have any Eastern philosophy background, but I just use the words because those are the only ones that I have. But there is a state where if you cross over, you can go into a sort of a dream state and stay there for a while. And you want to avoid that if not. So being lucid in your life, being lucid in dreams, being lucid in your OBE experiences help prepare you for that. And there are lots of people who do practitioner work out there to sort of prepare people for that. And there's, I can't remember the guy's name, but he wrote a book called Dream Yoga, which I think is great. And he does retreats. And I think that people can prepare themselves for this. And we are actually, when babies come into the world, if they sleep all the time because they're getting themselves acclimated to this new reality system. Likewise, when people are sick and they're close to transitioning and going to leave the planet, they sleep a lot. Really old people might start sleeping 12 hours a night. Again, they're getting themselves acclimated for going back into that other reality. But never forget this. We are dual citizens of both realities. So,
Exactly.
and we're constantly there through our dreams. So if you want to know what your after-death experience is going to be like, and this might scare some people, pay attention to your dreams. What are your dreams like? What are your dream settings like? What issues are you finding that seem to be unresolved, that your dreams are calling for you to work on? These are all preparations for going over into the other reality. So it's a continuation. It's not a start and stop. It's all connected.
I think that, it's physical reality is an exquisite school, learning place that we all have mandatory attendance. Mike, I was wondering, what was your most the most surprising event? Did you run into someone that you'd known, that loved one? Did you get any interesting messages? Did you get any special insights when you returned? It's a big question, but I think you have a lot of answers.
Well, I have answers for me. I don't know if I have answers for anybody else, but there's two parts of why people do OBE stuff. One is, obviously, it's interesting. Your fear of death, obviously, is not going to be as palpable, but it's fascinating. I mean, it's an amazing way to, I still don't take it for granted, even though I've been doing it a long time and can move in and out of worlds pretty easily, but it still fascinates me. It's highly interesting. I mean, if somebody said, I can put you on a rocket ship and take you to Mars, I would say, no, that's okay. I already been to Mars. I think it's one of the most interesting things you can do. As far as experiences that I've had, the most profound experiences I have had are in my rescues, in helping other people that don't know they're dead get to way stations where there are guides there that can help them. And I think that's the most fascinating. There's one personal incident. I helped my father across. Can I tell you that story?
Oh, I'd love to hear it. The listeners would really, really find this meaningful. Please share.
So my father, he was going to be cremated, and I went to his memorial service, and I was going to do the eulogy for him. And that very moment, I was staying at a friend's house, and that very moment, I had an out-of-body experience. And I was in sort of a dark place. There was no light in it. And I was standing there, and all of a sudden, I looked over, and there was my father. But I didn't recognize him because he didn't look the same. He looked like he was in his late 20s. And the only reason I knew it was him was because I had seen pictures of him when he was young. So I go over to him, and he's wrapped in sort of a shroud, and he's out of it. I mean, you can look in his eyes and tell he doesn't know where he is or what's going on, and he's not aware of my presence. So I go over and I put my hands on his shoulder and I say, "Dad." And all of a sudden, that recognition, he sees me and that look of recognition in his eyes, and he looks at me and he says, "I'm so cold." And I said, "Dad, you don't realize it, but you've died." And then he remembered. You could kind of look on his face and tell that he remembered. So I didn't know how long I could stay out of body, and I didn't want to miss this opportunity to help him. So I took him in my arms and I raised him up, and he floated up above me. And then when he got about 10 feet above me, he took off like a rocket, and this blackness opened up, and it was like a rainbow, like a portal, and he flew through it like the fastest jet you've ever seen, and then it closed back up, and that was it.
Oh my gosh.
So I got to actually help my father cross over. Now, skeptics can say, "Oh, well, you missed your father and you're into all this stuff and all of that." And I totally understand that. I dismiss other people's experiences because they're not mine, no matter how strange they may be. They're not my experiences. So for your listeners, I can tell you that somebody that's done this hundreds of times, this was the real deal. And that's probably the most profound experience in my life. And maybe, who knows, the reason why I can even do this at all.
I think what you did was the most loving act a son could do for the father, and to know that you helped him and got him going in literally the right direction. I found, now I'm sure you have found also, that when you are out of body, it is more real than physical reality. Do you concur?
I don't get the sense that it's more real. So I think when people had near-death experiences come back and they talk about a vividness, I live in a really beautiful place. I'm sitting by the ocean right now talking to you. So my reality is filled with lots of beautiful things here in Southern California. So my consensus reality is probably the best that you could probably get here on Earth. And I've traveled a lot and I've done a lot of things, and I've seen some of the most beautiful sights. And so for me, when I go into other reality systems, I find them to be not unlike the Earth environments that I've experienced. Mm-hmm. So I don't really have that sense of it's more real than real. Did you have that in your experience?
Yes, I did. I felt more awake.
I mean, it's
more like I could see better, I could hear better. I mean, I felt an intensity that is not in this physical reality level. But also, my health is diminished, so I felt healthy there. Maybe that was the contrast.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, there are so many different levels to other reality systems that, you know, when people say they have a near-death experience, they kind of filter it through their own belief systems. You know, all of the gentlemen that I had mentioned, Rudolf Steiner and Swedenborg and Monroe, they all carried their own belief systems. Edgar Cayce, for instance, you know, very religious man, kind of viewed everything in that sense. So, like I said, when you cross over, you kind of interpret things based on what your belief systems are. And when you come back, you explain it in those terms. So some people see Jesus or they see the white light or whatever. You know, I mean, people have different kinds of experiences. I'm more like an EMT, you know, like emergency technician. When I go, I've got work to do. The other part of it, the recreational part that I do, is time travel. So, and that's what I'm writing my next book about, is how to manipulate through the different timelines using the out-of-body experience or lucid dreams. So I do that for recreation. And when I get to those periods, they are incredible, and they're beyond any reality that I could even have imagined. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Do you have a title?
I have a working title. I'm not happy with it, but so I'm not going to say it, but you know, I'm looking for inspiration for it because, you know, there's so many books out there. We don't have enough time to read all of them. So I'm trying to write this more as a niche book for people that are interested in time travel and OBE. So this book is pretty much for those people.
Well, how about I am going to invite you when you launch your next book. I'll invite you back on the show. We can talk about it then. Does that sound like a good idea?
I'm all yours.
Very few men say that to me, but thank you. Okay, Mike, on a serious level, when you have been to these consensus realities and you're not on a retrieval mission, and you see these beautiful Earth-like places, have you run into people, talk to other souls that are there?
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah.
Do they look? Are they in a form? Are they in a spirit like an orb, or they have a physical? Looks like they have a complete copy of their physical body.
They're dressed in clothes. And some of them know they're in consensus realities, which is interesting too. Yeah, I mean, some of these realities that I've gone to, I mean, they have shopping malls. They're like the coolest shopping malls you've ever seen. I've seen pictures of Singapore and Dubai and, you know, some of the amazing places that they built there. They're nothing like anything that I've seen here in this consensus reality of Earth. But yeah, there's a reality for whatever you want to do. I've gone to places where artists tend to congregate and people that have a particular kind of art that they like, and they create that art with others. And then there's places for musicians, and I play the guitar, and I feel like I have the soul of a musician, even though I'm not very good. But when I go to those realities, there's like music, like it's amazing. It's the most beautiful stuff I've ever seen. And I wish I was a better musician so I could come back and just bring it back in this reality like Mozart did. So a lot of artists, I think, you know, got their inspiration through their dreams, and they were able to bring that back into this reality and created some of the most beautiful ideas, scientific ideas and art, and all of that comes from, you know, other realities that we bring back with us. You know, like I said, we're a dual citizen. As you are listening to me right now, Laura, part of you is in that other reality system. So we are our reality is permeable, and we're more aware of it during our dream life than at any other time. But don't forget that we're doing it right at this moment too.
Mike, do you feel like your higher self is kind of steering the boat there?
No, I don't really have any theories about higher self.
Okay.
I don't, I
In your,
don't really get a sense of any higher self or anything like that.
have you seen any inclination towards like you've done this before, past lives? Have you seen souls of yourself?
Well, one of the things that I do is, so I'm very aware of parallel lives going on right now, choices that I've made, um, past timelines. So I don't have a sense of reincarnation. I don't look at reincarnation. To me, looks at time as sort of a linear thing, and I don't look at it that way. I look at it like all time is going on right now. So, and that quantum physics backs that up. So, I have a sense of myself in other timelines, and sometimes when I time travel, I feel like I'm going back into the persona of that person that lived in that particular time. Does that make sense?
Familiarity? Do you feel like, is it there? I don't mean to interrupt, Mike. Is there a familiarity when you travel?
Sometimes, yes. During the Revolutionary War, that period, I really get a sense of that, that I was around during that time. And I also think that if you think about it, Laura, all of our DNA contains the programming of all of our ancestors. So, on a quantum level, all of our atoms floating in subatomic particles floating around inside of us are timeless. They can pop in and out of other reality systems at will. Well, that's what we're constructed of. And also, our DNA is our programming. So, why wouldn't we have all of those programs, all of those engrams of our ancestors contained in our DNA? And those things could start to assert themselves in the non-physical when we loosen, our attachment to our physical body. Why wouldn't that be available to us? And that's for another book.
It is. I mean, we're getting a little off course here, but it's very, very fascinating. So, Mike, with all your experiences, have you formulated an intent, a plan when you make your transition? Do you know where you want to go after you leave your physical body for the last time?
I'm one of these fly by your seat of the pants kind of guys. So I may give the advice to others, to plan well, but because I've spent so much time over there, I'll probably just go and I'm a big proponent of asking the locals where the best sites are when I travel. I don't know about you. So what's the best restaurants? What are the best realities to go to? I'll probably do a lot of that. That may not be what your listeners would want to do, but I know one thing that I'm going to do for sure is that I'm going to have a guide waiting for me. So if you travel to another country and you have somebody waiting for you at the airport with your name on it, that's the way I'm going to kind of cross over, is that there's going to be a guide there waiting for me. And I highly recommend that to people, that when you start arranging that, and if there is something you want to do. Now, some people build houses. They actually come up with their dream house. Did you ever see that movie, What Dreams May Come?
Yes, I thought that was really, super Catholic guilt, but it was pretty creative.
Well, there's a scene in there about, there's this incredible house, and, he finds out that he had been building that in his dreams. And there are some people that do that. They actually plan out their whole afterlife, and they build a house, and then they kind of have a life similar to what they have only now, but only better.
I think that's very doable. Mike, let me tell you something about me. theoretically, if I died and there was two doors I could go through, and one said heaven and one said the lecture on heaven, I'd go to the lecture on heaven because I'm a detailed person. I can't fly.
I love that.
My pants, I think a lot of people are like me. We just kind of want to have the kit ready to go. And I think it's nice and refreshing to talk to you because you're very humble and you're very modest about your great accomplishments. I think we all need to have some humility in this and a little bit of humor because, we're talking about things that a lot of people just haven't experienced or talked about. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think curiosity. Someone asked me one time, what is it about yourself that you would never want to give up or you most appreciate? And I said my curiosity, because without that, life would have been a really long, hard slog. So my curiosity has gotten me to the point where I can do this, I'm sure. And, if I were to give anybody any advice, I'm always reluctant to do that, but I would say that, just become as lucid in your life as you possibly can. But what I mean is become conscious, recognize that you have a foot in both worlds, and get acquainted with that other world through your dreams. First step is just remember your dreams, and then start to learn from that, and share the fact that your physical and non-physical, that duality is going on all the time. You're part of both realities already. So when you die, you're as alive. The moment after your heart stops and your last breath, you are as live as you ever were.
Well, it's a delicate dance, I think, that we all experience between the dimensions and go to during our sleep state. How many people have you spoken with that are kind of on your same level or having your same type of journey? Do you think this happens to very many people?
I have no idea. I don't know how rare this is. I don't tend to hang around the psycho-spiritual community. I did when I had my awakening because I was trying to find other people like me, and I was sorely disappointed. There wasn't anybody like me, and I think even people that have near-death experiences, they think that they're joining some community of people that are like them, but our experiences are all so different. Yes. And even though we've had similar experiences, we often can't even relate to each other, even though we've had a similar experience like that, because they're so different.
Well, Mike, I think there's a lot of people like myself that had the near-death experience or out of body and didn't speak about it. I didn't speak about it for 30 years. Now, that's a long time. I channeled it into novels because it was just, it was just happening. It's like I couldn't put the lid on it. But I think there's a lot of people that, they have very serious jobs. They could be a lawyer or a doctor, and they would be horrified if their little secret got out, because people are so discrediting and quite cruel in the media if you have a different experience than the norm. Do you agree with that?
I hear that. I've never felt that from day one. I would tell anybody that I could get them to listen. I honestly don't care what other people think, and I've always been that way. But I understand that there are people who feel like that, like their reputations. Sure. People won't take them seriously. Thoreau said, talked about, being inoculated to the good opinion of others. I've sort of been that way. I kind of fly on my own path, but I know that exists. And one of your guests, you had Raymond Moody on, right?
Yes, we had half. I've done half an interview with him. I'm going to do the other half soon.
Yeah, I mean, thank goodness for him and people like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And you know, I was fortunate that all of these people were around. I lived in Virginia, and Dr. Ross was living there. In fact, she was in my Lifeline program at the Monroe Institute. And Raymond Moody, I've met a couple of times. And when I first had my opening, PMH Atwater was in Richmond, Virginia. Someone had her over to their home, and I went over and met her. I saw that you've interviewed her as well.
Oh,
so there are pioneers out there that have kind of made people feel more comfortable about this. And, you know, God bless them.
I think that was very courageous of Dr. Moody because, he's a medical doctor and psychiatrist. I mean, for him to write Life After Life and do what he is, I told him, I said, you know what, you're my hero, and I wish I'd read your book in 1979. I finally went to a therapist in New York, when I was 25, and I just blurted out all these things that had happened to me because I'd been keeping it in for like 7 years. And she gave me a copy of Robert Monroe's book. And she didn't discredit me at all. She had, other people like me. And it was like, finally, I got a lifeline. It took years. But, we need these brave pioneers to come out and, open things up and get this dialogue going. Nobody, Mike, I don't believe anybody who's had an out-of-body experience, a near-death experience, ever wants to be labeled a wackadoo. The one thing I do love is as I get older, the less embarrassed I could ever be.
and Laura, to that point, like talking about Dr. Moody at the University of Virginia, they have the DOPS program, which, studies all this stuff, past lives, all of that. And it's been going on for, 40 years. And all around the world, there are all kinds of scientific research being done. Here in the United States, we had the Rhine Center. I don't think that's still operational, but that sort of kicked off a lot of it. And so there's a lot of scientific research going on into this. So it's not just a bunch of lay people like yourself and myself out there doing this. So it has a lot of credibility.
Yeah.
And there are scientists and people that, I mean, they're starting to have NDEs, and they come back and they go, hey, I don't know what this was, but I got to tell you about it. I think you had Evan Alexander on talking about his experience. So, yeah, I think people can feel more comfortable about it now, talking about it. And, there's something that happens in the process afterwards. It happened to me, is that, we have the experience, and then we try to explain it to ourselves and others. And we don't do a very good job because it's unexplainable in many ways, as you probably know, because you had that experience.
Well, and, we're always forever trying to figure it out, label it, put it in a box, comprehend it, because it's so different than physical reality. Mike, I've got an interesting question for you here, and I think that the listeners would like to know. Let's say when you decide, you want to have an out-of-body experience, you're kind of itching to do it, what are the preparations before you lay down at night, or you do a meditation? How do you get there if you want it to happen?
Oh, that's a good question. Again, my personality is I'm not a big planner, so I kind of just assume I'll have them when I'm supposed to. But if I really want to have one, I set the intention to do so. And because I've been doing it so long, I can recognize the signals of when I'm out. So most people, when they wake up at night and in the middle of the night, and they're sort of in that groggy state, they're still kind of separated from their body. So if I wake up like that, I pretty much know I can roll out of bed. And I've rolled out of bed many times not knowing if I was going to thump on the floor, but there's like this subtle difference when you're detached from your body, and it's sort of like with lucid dreamers. If you think you're in a lucid dream, you are. If you think you can get out of body, you can. And I'll roll out of bed, and then I'll be laying on the carpet, and then I stand up, and then I figure out what I'm going to do then. Most of the time, I don't do the same thing the other OBEers do. I switch frequencies really quick. So I do something I call a spin move, and I spin on one foot, and I kind of say where I want to go. So I have some sort of general idea. Like there's a place I like to go to called Home Station. And again, at the Monroe Institute, they created a consensus reality called the Park. Are you familiar with that?
I know all about the Park, yes.
Okay, yeah. So I've got one that I like to go to called Home Station, and it looks like it looks like an airport or train terminal. And from there, you can go anywhere you want to go. Anyway, I know this is weird, and
I know this is kind of weird, but I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to forget it if I don't say it. When you're at that way station, do you see groups of people going in different directions, walking silently?
Oh, not only that, I see people that do not look anything like human beings. So apparently there are a lot of people that use this. And it was introduced to me to a guide by a guide one time. So sometimes I get out and I get a guide, and so he just nonchalantly took me this place because this is where he takes people sometimes. This was a male guide, or at least the energy was male. And I got in there and I went, wow, this is really, really cool. So anyway, I use that a lot.
I think that's very, very fascinating. Back to your book, Why Am I Here, that we all can get on Kindle. It's a handbook for the human experience. What is the most important message that you have written in this book?
Oh, let me think. There's a lot in there. So if you...
How about the top three?
All right. So if there was a human being that came to Earth, if they got their hands on this book and they actually believed it, or they took it into elementary schools, we would have a whole different world. Now, I'm not saying that because I think my book is so profound or anything. It would be like a manual that someone coming to Earth would really benefit from having. So I think the most important thing that I found out during my awakening experience is this, that we came here for this human experience. And our amnesia about who we really are, our persona that we occupy here, is very important for having the human experience, just as the body is. And the fact that we don't really remember our true natures is a feature, not a bug. If we wanted to be a part of our true natures, we wouldn't have opted in to this human experience.
Exactly.
So I think the most important thing for the message that I hope someone gets out of that book is that you came here to have the kinds of experiences that you are having, but having some sense of awareness about who you really are that runs congruently with it is an important tool in your toolbox.
Oh, yes, yes. For myself, I got a feeling through my experiences, an urgency to get my life right. to get into good, healthy relationships with friends and just to get my life right. And I've done the best I can. You know, I'm not perfect, but did you ever get an urgent feeling about how you should do things?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Did you feel after, going out of body that when you came back, you had an urgency to conduct your life right, to get things done correctly? Now, I'm not talking about being a perfectionist, but to bring in good, healthy relationships, to, more of a strengthening of your morality. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, I know that there are people that have had near-death experiences that come back with some of that, and I don't really have that. I don't really have that sense of things. I don't really sense that there's anything. What I experienced is that there is no judgment in the universe, and if there's any judging or anyone categorizing one mode of being better than another, that's all a human thing. The universe doesn't really care about any of that, other than certain things like love, compassion. Those things actually resonate at a higher frequency.
Yes,
so
yes.
That's sort of your ticket to other realms of possibility after you cross over. But as far as, this whole thing about you should live your life this way or whatever, that's what the whole human experience is about, is that you discover that that is part of you that you find preferable to other states. So if love and compassion and all of that, you actually feel better when you do it because it's a finer energy. And when that takes over your body and your mind, then you feel actually lighter and better. But there's no requirement for that when you cross over into other, post transition. You'll just end up in the frequency that you resonate with, and you might want to determine what frequency that is by, if you need to learn more about love, you might want to start now.
Yeah, I just think that, you have a whole, shift towards values and, hopefully for the better. But I think...
Well, values and... Can I stop you there?
Oh,
values
sure.
And better and morality and all of that, that's all human constructions. That doesn't have anything to do with anything. When you cross over, none of that, I mean, other than you're going to have a different kind of post-life experience. I mean, if you're an angry, cruel person that hasn't done anything for anybody else, you're going to have an experience, post-transition that resembles that. So if you're okay with that, then go ahead, but there's no judgment about it. The universe could care less.
For morality, for me, is being kind to people, loving, and letting go of fear. Those were my, that's kind of my truth, and maybe not for other people. But, I kind of got
that will serve you well.
Hopefully, because, I've got a potty mouth and kind of a bad temper at times. So I'm a work in progress like most of us. Okay.
I would refine that potty mouth. I'd make it really, really good. I mean, I mean, if there are words that you don't say, then just go ahead and, feel free to say them because it doesn't matter.
I swear too much. I'm sorry. When I get frustrated or something, yeah, I swear too much. So, I'm not going to hell for that. So that's a good thing. Mike, what kind of message would you like to leave our listeners with about your experiences?
Well, let me think about that, because as I close this out, as our conversation has evolved around all of this stuff, is that I guess that you can't do it wrong. I mean, there's no right or wrong. There's just doing. And thinking about things is not the same thing as taking action. So we walk around, we're concerned about racism, or we're concerned about poverty in the world, or all of that. And we kind of get delusional that we're actually doing something because we're concerned about it, that we think about it. And don't get fooled by that, because you're only doing something out in the reality if you're actually physically involved in doing it. And, you know, so I guess the point I would like to make is that get out there and do it. Whatever it is, just do it.
I think you have
Sounds like a Nike ad.
positivity.
Sounds like a Nike ad. I'm sorry.
I know. You know, we're all doing the best we can. So, you know, you've got a good sense of humor, and I kind of like to leave, you know, the listeners, you know, for the last question is, you know, was there anything that was funny or really humorous that you experienced while out of body?
You know, because of my sense of humor, I find all of it funny. I find my interactions with the non-physicals over there are hilarious. I mean, a sense of humor is important in other realities. These people are funny, and
They're taking over.
I mean, they love they love puns. You know, I found that out. You know, it's like I'll come back and I'll go, oh, I get it. I get what they were saying. Yeah, it's dying is funny.
Well, letting go of fear, I think, is so important before we make our final destination. And Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show. Why Am I Here? A handbook for the human experience. Get it on Amazon, read it, and please, you know, leave your thoughts and messages on the YouTube channel, you know, after you've read it. I'd love to read them. So, Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show. I so much appreciate it. And goodbye, and we want to have you back.
Thank you, Laura. I enjoyed it.
Okay. So I'm ending this episode, and we're going to have this fellow back, but soon. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. The Near-Death Saga books, Near-Death Connection, Throwaway Horses, and Reincarnation Connection can all be found on Amazon. Or you can go to the Near-DeathSaga.com to read book previews. For more Near-Death TV interviews, go to Near-DeathTV.com. Thank you.